In this video, I want to talk about decisions. Decisions, decisions, decisions. We all know the importance of decisions because in order to move from point A to point B, we have to make the decision to do it. And so many people know what they want to do. They so know where they want to get to. They so know what they want to feel, and they so know what it is they want to have. We've all got many desires, but we have to make a decision to go and get it. If you go to the shops, you have to have made a decision to go to the shops. So decisions lay at the foundations of the output that we put into life. And of course, our behaviors and the output that we put out, which I've discussed in previous videos, will ultimately build a picture and will create the quality of life that we have. So everything starts with a decision. I remember hearing Tony Robbins once say that if you think about a decision, think about some of the big decisions that you've made in your life and ask yourself, had you made the opposite decision, how would your life have panned out? Very, very differently, I'm sure. So our decisions are what carve out the life that we have. Now, we can't regret the decisions that we've made, and I'm going to talk about that on other videos as well, how to deal with past decisions that we're not happy with. But our decisions play a major part in the world that we build for ourselves, for the life that we build for ourselves. And so many people struggle with making decisions, with committing to going on this journey, committing to go from A to B. They get stuck in that mental process, in that thinking process of saying, I am gonna do this, or I am gonna stop doing that, or I'm gonna even just buy this thing. So what I wanna do in these videos is to share some tips that allow us to make the decision making a lot easier, to be able to have more control over that process that really carves out the life that we build. The first tip that I want to share is probably one of the most important ones, and it's so subtle, but it makes a massive difference in easing the tension in making a decision. Because I think a lot of people, when it comes to making a decision, they feel a lot of tension, there's a lot of pressure, like the whole world is dependent upon the decision that I'm going to make. So this idea that I want to share will release a lot of tension. I get called a lot from people and they tell me, Joe, I've got a decision to make and I'm not sure which one is the right decision. I'm not sure which job is the right job to take, or I'm not sure which relationship is the right relationship. And I would say within that question lies the problem. Unless you're God, of course, and if I'm talking to God right now, well, hello, nice to meet you. But assuming that you're not God, then the question of, is this the right decision, is flawed. And I'll tell you why. And it's really one word, the word right. It's impossible to know if this is the right decision, unless, of course, you are God. Because no one knows what the right decision is. I mean, that's a pretty absolute statement to make. Is this the right decision? And we're never going to no. And we're going to drive ourselves mad. Is this the right decision? And it's just going to be impossible to know. So I'd like to suggest a different way of seeing it. But the reason why people, I think, want to have the right decision is because they want to know that there's not going to be any pain along the way. If I make the right decision, then everything will just flow greatly. Everything will just flow smoothly. And that within itself is wrong. Because as I've said so many times, you're probably getting bored of me saying this, that life does not go in a straight line. I live by a number of principles, a number of what I call life guides that serve me really, really well. And one of them is life doesn't go in a straight line. It really does not go in a straight line. If it did, everyone would be doing what they wanted to do and we wouldn't feel a sense of achievement and there wouldn't be much point. It's the challenges that make us greater and make us feel greater and make us have a better quality of life. So life does not go in a straight line. So wanting to make the right decision in some ways I think is subtly suggesting that if we make it right, if we make the right decision, then we won't have any pain going forward. So I think we have to kind of scrap that way of thinking, and I think that would take a lot of pressure off if we know we don't have to make the right decision. So you may be thinking, okay, Joe, what if I'm not trying to make the right decision? Am I going to be trying to make the wrong decision? I mean, that sounds pretty crazy. So I'm not suggesting you go away thinking, how do I make the wrong decision? But what I would suggest, and this is what I tell people, instead of trying to make the right decision, what about trying to make the most logical decision? Big difference. Instead of trying to make the right decision, why don't we try and make the most logical decision that makes the most sense, which is based upon logic? Because trying to make a decision based upon what's right is going into the world of being God. And no one knows, is this going to be the right decision? Because we can't fortune tell to know how it's going to pan out. And of course, as I said before, life doesn't go in a straight line. So there's going to be challenges along the way with whatever decision we make, even if it is the right decision. So I suggest to people that instead of trying to make the right decision, let's make the most logical decision. What does logic dictate when it comes to making this decision? What does logic say about this decision? Where does the most amount of logic lie in the decisions that we have? And one of the ways to determine where the logic lies is by thinking about the following thinking process. And let me bring it out with an example. So a typical example I'll get is, Joe, I've got 2 jobs available to me and I'm not sure which one to take. Okay, I've got job A and job B. Which one should I take? And I normally respond and say, well, that's an impossible question to answer because I can't tell you what you should do now. You're looking at it wrong. You're looking at it now at here. How do I know? How are we meant to know which one is the most logical one to make? If we want to find out which one is the most logical one to make, instead of focusing on the now, let's focus 5 years from now. Let's focus just 2 years from now, or even bigger, let's go to 10 years from now. And let's ask yourself the question, where do you want to be? How much do you want to be earning? What kind of job title do you want? What kind of flexibility do you want? Now, if you tell me, okay, Joe, I want to be making £100,000 a year. Okay? And one of the jobs that you have is a dead-end job that really isn't going to give you much of a skill set to go on to a better job afterwards. Well, then that decision doesn't have a lot of logic to dictate that you should take it. If the other job will provide a better skill set, has more opportunities for you to go afterwards, right? Which industry do you want to go into? Well, if I've got 2 jobs and you want to go into healthcare, and one is stocking shelves in Tesco's and another one is working in a health clinic, well, now we've got a bit more logic to work with. So instead of working bottom up, where there isn't much logic available to us, just a lot of doubts, a lot of not knowing, instead let's work top down. Where do I want to be? Where do I want to see myself? Right? And the same to apply with relationships. And I see this a lot. That a lot of people go into relationships and they're like, is it the right one? Is it the right one? I'm like, you're never going to know. You're never going to know. And even if it is the right one, from my experience of working with a lot of couples, there's always going to be challenges. And studies show it's not about the challenges. It's not about the stress that comes into a relationship. It's about how they deal with the stress. But that's for my relationship talks. But if we want to know if this person, the most logical person for us to marry or commit to or go into a relationship with, then again we have to work top down instead of bottom up. And I ask people, like, what is it that you want out of life? Where do you want to see yourself 10 years from now? What kind of relationship do you want to have? Simple things like how many kids do you want to have? Where do you want to send them to school? What kind of religious affiliation or no religious affiliation do you want to have? What things are important to you? What values are important to you? And many, many times I would talk to these individuals and they would look at me like I've gone mad. And they haven't asked these questions. They've been too busy trying to see if they connect and they have fun and their personalities go well and lots of things are important, don't get me wrong, but the bigger picture eludes them. The bigger picture of top down, they don't have that information to be able to make the logical decision. And if you don't have that information, then not only are you never going to be able to make the right decision, but you also, which is going to be impossible to make anyway, but we're going to struggle to make the logical decisions because we've got nothing to base it upon. So it's so important to work top down. So think about a decision that you're trying to make right now. Think about a decision that you've got, decision A versus decision B. And ask yourself, am I trying to make firstly the right decision? Well, let's just scrap that. Let's just agree that we're never going to know what's the right decision. And the truth is, to a certain extent, whatever decision you make will be right for you in that moment. Right? Looking back, we must never regret decisions because in that moment we made the right decision based upon the information that we had. Could we have had more information? We could have, but we didn't. And the reality is that we didn't. So based upon the reality which was at that time, it was the right decision for us. But is it the absolute right decision? We're never going to know. So let's scrap that ideal way of seeing decisions because it's just going to hold us back and create a lot of tension and we're going to get stuck in the decision making instead of actually making a decision. And instead, let's look for the logic. What does the logic dictate? So let's look at a decision that you've got. Are you seeing the bigger picture? Do you have a bigger picture to which to build logic from to dictate which decision shall I make? If you're deciding which job or you've got a different decision, where should you live, where should you buy a home or whatever it might be, what school do you want to send your kids to? Well, ask yourself the question, how do you want your kids to be 5 years from now? How do you want your kids to be 10 years from now? What kind of values do you want to install with them? What kind of belief system do you want them to have? If it's a home, well, what's important to you within a home? How do you want to see your home, your house 10 years from now? What's important to you? Do you want to see it go, you want to buy a house that's just going to go up in value, or do you want to buy a house that's going to be part of a community? What's important to you? And when you find out what's important to you 5 years down the line, or 10 years, or even just 2 years down the line, you then have something to work off. And then you can start applying this logic concept. Well, okay, so I want to buy a home and community is important to me. It's not so important if it goes up in value, but I just want to have a home that's be within the community. Now I can start using that kind of value, that kind of vision to try and kind of weed out the houses that don't fit within that kind of vision and go for the houses that do. So when we work top down and start looking for logic, it becomes a lot easier process of elimination, which will then guide us to the decision that is right based upon logic. But we're using the logic to get to what people might describe as the right decision. But when we're looking for this absolute right decision and we don't know where we want to be 5 years from now within the decision that we're making, we are going to literally torment ourselves. We're going to torment ourselves through the constant thinking, is it the right decision, but what about this? And there's no guide. There's absolutely no guide to work from. So point number one is like this. Stop making the right decision, because you'll never know what the right decision is. And instead, let's work with logic. What does logic dictate based upon where I want to be 2 years from now, based on where I want to be 5 years from now? And I've just seen that allows people to have a little bit more of a relaxed kind of mindset when it comes to making decisions, because the pressure is off. The pressure is off trying to create something that's impossible to create, which is the right decision. Instead, now they start working on which one makes the most logical sense based upon where I want to be, and that feels right for them.